The desert sun hammered down like the fist of God himself. 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade. Except there was no shade. Not here. Not in the Helmand Province Badlands, where the Taliban own the rocks, and the Marines own nothing but their courage and their weapons. August 15th, 2012. A convoy of 4 Humvees crawled across the moonscape like beetles on a skillet. Inside the third vehicle, Corporal Mackenzie Dalton gripped her medical kit with hands that never trembled, not even when the world was about to explode. 23 years old, red hair pulled back so tight it made her scalp ache. Green eyes that had seen too much death for someone who should still be figuring out what to do with her life. But Mac had figured that out 4 years ago when she walked into the recruiter's office in Augusta, Georgia, and said 5 words that changed everything. I want to save lives. Now she was about to prove she meant it. The radio crackled, static and tension. Staff Sergeant Dylan Cross rode in the lead vehicle, his voice cutting through the white noise like a blade through silk. Stay sharp. This stretch has been hot all week. Mac checked her kit for the 100th time that morning. Tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, chest seals, plasma, the tools of her trade. The difference between a Marine going home in a flag-draped coffin or walking off a plane into his wife's arms. Lance Corporal Griffin Cole sat across from her, barely 22, baby-faced, scared. His leg bounced like a jackhammer. His M4 carbine looked too big in his hands. First time through this sector? Mac asked. Cole nodded, swallowed hard. Stay behind me if things go sideways. I'll get you home. She always said that, and she always meant it. The explosion came at 1100 hours exactly. Not the sharp crack of a rifle, not the whistle of incoming mortars, the deep, world-ending crump of an improvised explosive device buried 3 feet under the hardpan dirt, 200 pounds of homemade death waiting for the exact moment when the lead Humvee's front tire rolled over the pressure plate. The blast lifted the 7-ton vehicle like a toy. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. The shockwave hit Mac's Humvee like a physical punch, rattling her teeth, turning her vision white for 3 full seconds. When the world came back, it came back wrong. The lead Humvee was on its side, burning. Black smoke poured into the blue sky, and the gunfire started. A K-47s from the ridgeline to the north, the distinctive crack, crack, crack that every Marine learned to recognize in their nightmares. Contact north! Contact north! Mac's door flew open before her driver could kill the engine. Her boots hit the sand. The heat was nothing. The bullets were everything. They snapped past her head like angry hornets, kicking up dirt 3 inches from her feet. She ran toward the burning vehicle. Her training took over. Not thought, not fear, just movement, just purpose. The 4 principles of combat medicine screaming in her head with every step. Return fire, take cover, assess casualties, treat and evacuate. Except Mac skipped straight to number 3. Staff Sergeant Cross was still in the driver's seat, pinned by twisted metal. Blood ran down his face from a gash above his eye, but he was conscious, trying to push the door open with his shoulder. Cross, can you move? Trapped. Get Cole. He's... Mac didn't wait for him to finish. She scrambled around the burning wreckage. The heat from the flames was intense enough to blister paint. Griffin Cole had been thrown 15 feet from the vehicle. He lay face down in the dirt, not moving. No, no, God, please, no. She reached him in 4 seconds, rolled him over. His eyes were open, shocked, alive. But his right leg was wrong, so wrong. The femoral artery had been severed by shrapnel. Blood pumped out with every heartbeat, spreading across the sand in a crimson stain that grew faster than Mac could process. She was already moving, tourniquet from her kit, positioned high on the thigh, twisted tight. Cole screamed, a sound that would haunt her for years. But the bleeding slowed, stopped. Stay with me, Marine. You're going home, I promise." Bullets continued to snap overhead. The Taliban fighters on the ridge had the high ground, had the angles, had every advantage except one. They weren't United States Marines. Return fire erupted from the other Humvees. Controlled bursts, suppressive fire, buying Mac the seconds she needed. She keyed her radio. "Medevac, medevac, we have 4 casualties. Priority Alpha." The response came through broken and distant. "Medevac en route. 15 minutes." 15 minutes. Eternity measured in heartbeats. Mac left Cole with another Marine and ran back to the overturned vehicle. Cross had managed to get the door partially open, but he was still trapped. And she could see the others now. PFC, Ethan Rivers in the back seat, his head at an angle that made Mac's stomach lurch. Possible spinal injury. And Corporal Travis Bennett slumped against the far door, his uniform soaked with blood. She made a decision that would define the rest of her life. "I'm going in. Dalton, that vehicle could blow any second. Then help me move fast." She crawled through the shattered window. Glass cut through her uniform, sliced her forearms, but she didn't feel it. The interior of the Humvee was an oven. Metal surfaces too hot to touch. Smoke thick enough to choke. And the smell. Burning plastic, burning rubber, burning things that weren't supposed to burn. Bennett first. He was closest. Mac got her hands under his arms and pulled. Dead weight. 200 pounds of unconscious Marine. She dragged him 6 inches, 12 inches, every muscle in her back screaming. Halfway through the window, her uniform snagged on jagged metal. She yanked hard. The fabric tore. She kept pulling. Bennett came free. Other Marines grabbed him, dragged him to safety behind the 3rd Humvee. Mac went back in. Rivers was worse. The spinal injury meant she couldn't just yank him out, had to stabilize his head, had to move him as a unit. Her hands found the cervical collar in her kit, positioned it carefully around his neck. Rivers was semi-conscious, groaning, eyes rolling. "Stay still. Don't move. I've got you." She worked with precision that came from 1,000 hours of training, secured his head between her forearms, pulled him out inch by careful inch. Time became elastic, stretched, compressed, bullets still snapping, smoke still rising. But in Mac's world, there was only Rivers and the window, and the 6 feet between life and death. She got him out, laid him flat, checked his breathing, elevated his legs, moved to the next casualty. Cross had managed to free himself, was crawling away from the vehicle under his own power. That left Bennett, who Mac realized with growing horror was in worse shape than she'd thought. The blood wasn't from a single wound. It was from multiple shrapnel impacts across his abdomen. His intestines were visible through a 4-inch tear in his uniform. She grabbed him again, started pulling, and that's when the Taliban gunner on the ridge got lucky. The bullet came from 300 meters out, an AK-47 round, tumbling, destabilized by the distance. It should have missed. By all rights, by all laws of ballistics and probability, it should have buried itself in the sand 3 feet to Mac's left. Instead, it punched through her right side, just below the ribcage. Entry wound the size of a dime. Exit wound the size of a quarter. The round passed completely through her torso, missing her liver by less than an inch, nicking her lung, and exiting out her back. Mac felt the impact, felt the explosion of pain, felt her legs go weak. She did not stop pulling. Bennett came free of the vehicle. Mac stumbled, went down to one knee, coughed, tasted blood. Her uniform was suddenly wet and warm. She looked down, saw the hole, saw the blood spreading. Her training spoke again. Treat yourself, or you can't treat anyone else. She pressed her hand against the wound. The pain was extraordinary, like being branded with a white-hot iron. Her vision grayed at the edges. Her ears rang. She heard voices, distant, muffled. "Dalton's hit! Dalton's hit!" Hands grabbed her, started to pull her toward cover. She fought them off with strength she didn't know she had. No! Get them first!
Cole, Rivers, Bennett, Cross, get them first. Mac, you're bleeding out.
I said get them first. She meant it. Every word, every syllable. These 4 Marines were going home to their families. Were going home to their wives, their children, their futures. Mac didn't know if she had a future, but she knew with absolute certainty that these men did. She stayed on her knees, applied pressure to her own wound with one hand. With her other hand, she keyed her radio.
Medevac, this is Corporal Dalton.
4 priority Alpha casualties ready for immediate evacuation. And 1 priority Bravo, herself. Priority Bravo, walking wounded. Except she wasn't walking anymore. The world was getting darker, the edges closing in like curtains. She could hear the helicopter now, the beautiful, life-saving thunder of rotor blades cutting the superheated air. The Black Hawk touched down 40 meters away. Rotor wash kicked up a sandstorm. Marines carried the wounded in a choreographed dance of desperation. Cole first on a stretcher. Rivers second, still immobilized. Bennett third, barely conscious. Cross fourth, limping but mobile. A Navy corpsman ran toward Mac. She waved him off. Get them loaded. I can wait. Ma'am, I can wait. She watched all 4 Marines carried onto the helicopter. Watched the bird lift off, banking hard to the south, racing toward the combat hospital at Camp Bastion. Only then did Mac allow herself to fall. She hit the sand face first, tasted blood and dirt, felt hands rolling her over, felt pressure on her wound, felt the needle of a morphine injector in her thigh. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was a voice, one of the Marines from the other Humvees. Jesus Christ, she saved all 4. While shot, she saved all 4. Then nothing. 18 months later, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, March 2014. The industrial mop made a rhythmic squeak against the polished concrete floor. Back and forth, back and forth. The sound of Mac's life now. The soundtrack to her invisible existence. She wore the same utility uniform as every other Marine on base, but hers was different in one crucial way. No ribbons, no badges, no indicators of the warrior she'd been. Just a plain name tape that read, Dalton, and the eagle, globe, and anchor emblem that marked her as a Marine. Most people who passed her in the hallways of the Armory building didn't give her a second glance. Just another support staff member. Just another body filling a slot in the vast machine of military logistics. They didn't know, couldn't know, wouldn't know. That's how Mac wanted it. The morning shift started at 0600. Mac arrived at 0545. She'd always been early, even now, even in this job that required nothing of her except showing up and pushing a mop. She maintained the discipline that had been drilled into her at boot camp. Discipline was all she had left. Her small room in the barracks was Spartan, even by military standards. A narrow bed with hospital corners so tight you could bounce a quarter off the blanket. A footlocker containing everything she owned. A single photo on the wall. Her grandfather, Gunnery Sergeant William Bull Dalton, in his dress blues from 1991, standing in the Kuwaiti desert with an American flag planted behind him. Bull had fought in Desert Storm, the 100-hour war that everyone said wasn't a real war. Except Bull had spent those 100 hours staring down Iraqi T-72 tanks and carrying wounded Marines through artillery fire. He'd earned his Bronze Star the hard way, same as Mac. Mac kept her own Bronze Star in a locked box at the bottom of her footlocker. Next to it, the Purple Heart she'd received at a bedside ceremony in Landstuhl, Germany, while she was still unconscious from surgery. The citation was there too, carefully folded, never read. She didn't need to read it, she remembered every second. The physical wounds had healed, mostly. The bullet wound had required 3 surgeries to repair the damage to her lung. The shrapnel in her left shoulder had been deemed too dangerous to remove. It was still there, a permanent reminder, setting off metal detectors and aching whenever a storm rolled in. The invisible wounds were different. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The diagnosis had come 6 months after Afghanistan. Mac had initially refused to believe it. PTSD was for people who'd been broken by war. She wasn't broken. She'd done her job. She'd saved 4 lives. But the nightmares didn't care about her denial. The flashbacks didn't ask permission. And the bottle of pills in her medicine cabinet, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, 200 milligrams daily, was a constant reminder that her brain had been changed by what she'd experienced. The military solution had been to transfer her to non-combat duties. For her own well-being. She'd been offered a medical discharge with full benefits. She'd refused. Being a Marine wasn't something you did, it was something you were. So now she mopped floors in the same armory where combat Marines trained and equipped for their own deployments. She watched them, these warriors, as they checked out rifles and ammunition and body armor. Watched them joke and boast and prepare for the thing she could no longer do. She was invisible to them, a ghost haunting her own life. The armory supply window opened at 0700. Mac finished the main floor by 0650 and headed to the supply room to request cleaning materials for the upper offices. Standard procedure. She'd done it 100 times. But today would be different. Today, everything would change. Staff Sergeant Derek Sutton stood behind the supply counter, organizing inventory with the meticulous attention to detail that made him excellent at his job and insufferable as a human being. 36 years old, never deployed, never would deploy. A heart condition discovered during advanced training had rendered him permanently non-deployable, and that fact had curdled something inside him. Mac approached the window, slid her requisition form across the counter. "Morning, Staff Sergeant. Request supplies per this form." Sutton glanced at the paper, glanced at Mac. His lip curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Sweetheart, I think you're in the wrong building. Civilian contractors use the back entrance." Mac kept her voice level, professional. "I'm Corporal Dalton, United States Marine Corps. This is a standard requisition for—" "Corporal?" Sutton picked up the form like it was contaminated. "You push a mop, honey. Real Marines carry M4s. Something flickered in Mac's chest, a spark of the person she used to be. She squashed it down. "Staff Sergeant, I just need cleaning supplies. Floor polish, disinfectant." "What you need," Sutton interrupted, "is to understand the chain of command. You don't request, you ask nicely." Behind Mac, other Marines had started to gather. The morning rush. Men picking up equipment for training exercises. They were listening now, watching, and Sutton knew it. He was playing to an audience. "Please," Mac said quietly, "may I have the supplies?" Sutton made a show of examining the requisition form, held it up to the light, squinted at her signature. "This authorization looks questionable. Who signed off on this? Your supervisor? Or did you forge it yourself?" "That's my supervisor's signature. Captain Hendricks." "Captain Hendricks doesn't authorize janitorial supplies, sweetheart. That's not how this works." Mac felt her jaw tighten, felt the muscles in her neck go rigid. 18 months of being invisible. 18 months of swallowing her pride. 18 months of pretending she wasn't slowly dying inside. "Staff Sergeant," she said, and her voice was different now, colder, harder. "I have the proper authorization. I'm requesting supplies to do my assigned job. Are you going to fill this requisition or not?" Sutton's eyes narrowed. He didn't like the change in her tone, didn't like being challenged, especially in front of other Marines. He ripped the requisition form in half, then in quarters. Let the pieces flutter to the counter like confetti. "Request denied. Come back when you learn some respect." The room went silent. Conversation stopped. Even the radio chatter from the armory's back office seemed to fade. Max stared at the torn paper, stared at the man who just humiliated her for no reason except that he could. She thought about her grandfather. Bull Dalton, who'd held a position against Iraqi armor for 36 hours straight, who'd received the Bronze Star for valor, who'd taught her from childhood that a Marine never quits, never backs down, never surrenders their dignity. She thought about Griffin Cole, bleeding out in the Afghan sand, Travis Bennett, unconscious and disemboweled, Ethan Rivers, paralyzed, Dylan Cross, trapped in burning metal. She thought about the bullet that had punched through her torso and the way she'd refused evacuation until every single one of them was safe. She thought about the Purple Heart hidden in her footlocker, and she thought, enough. Staff Sergeant Sutton, she said, and her voice carried across the entire supply room. I've held more Marine intestines in my hands than you've seen in your entire career. I breathed through a collapsed lung while dragging wounded men from a burning vehicle. Don't you dare lecture me about respect. Sutton's face went red, then purple. You need to leave, now. I'll leave when you do your job. My job? My job? Sutton leaned across the counter. Let me tell you about jobs, Corporal Mop Pusher. Real Marines go to war. Real Marines face the enemy. What do? You make floors shiny. That's not a Marine. That's a janitor with a uniform. Mac didn't move, didn't blink, didn't show a single emotion on her face. Maybe, Sutton continued, warming to his theme now, playing to the growing audience. Maybe you'd serve the Corps better in a different capacity. Morale boosting, if you know what I mean. I bet you could make a lot of Marines very happy in ways that don't involve a mop. The implication was crystal clear. The sexual harassment was explicit, and every Marine in the room heard it. Mac felt something break inside her. Not collapse, break. Like a dam finally giving way after holding back years of pressure. 18 months of silence. 18 months of being invisible. 18 months of letting people like Derek Sutton define who she was. No more. She reached into her back pocket, pulled out a piece of paper she'd carried every day for the last year and a half, folded carefully, creased from being handled, but still legible. The Bronze Star citation. She unfolded it slowly, placed it on the counter between them, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet enough that people had to lean in to hear. Staff Sergeant, this document says I crawled into a kill zone 3 separate times under sustained enemy fire. It says I saved 4 United States Marines while critically wounded myself. It says I refused medical evacuation until every casualty was secured. So when you tell me I'm not a real Marine, she leaned forward, you can go straight to hell. Sutton's eyes dropped to the citation. His face went from purple to white in less than 2 seconds. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't. No, Mac said. You didn't know. You didn't bother to know. You saw a woman with a mop and decided that's all she was worth. The Marines around them were dead silent now. Several had their phones out, recording. This was going to be all over the base before lunch. And then a voice cut through the tension. Deep, authoritative, the kind of voice that made people stand straighter without thinking about it. Staff Sergeant, I believe you owe the corporal an apology and some cleaning supplies. Mac turned. Standing 15 feet away, tablet computer in one hand, was Master Chief Brennan Wolfe, 38 years old, Navy SEAL, 4 combat deployments, Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars. A man who'd seen more action than most Marines would see in 10 lifetimes. And he was staring at Derek Sutton like he was something scraped off the bottom of a boot. Wolfe walked forward slowly, each step measured, deliberate. He stopped next to Mac, tapped his tablet twice, turned it so everyone in the room could see the screen. It showed Mac's service record, full color, high resolution, every award, every citation, every detail of her service. Corporal Mackenzie Dalton, Wolfe said, reading from the screen. Bronze Star with Valor Device, Purple Heart, Combat Action Ribbon, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, Good Conduct Medal. He looked up, looked directly at Sutton. Helmand Province, August 15th, 2012. 3 separate rescues under fire. 4 Marines saved. 1 through-and-through gunshot wounds sustained while executing said rescues. He tapped the tablet again. A photograph appeared. Mac recognized it immediately. The official photo taken after her Bronze Star ceremony. She was in a hospital bed, still pale, still weak, but wearing her dress blues and holding the medal case. One of the Marines she saved, Wolf continued, was Lance Corporal Griffin Cole, who is now Captain Griffin Cole, stationed at Quantico, training the next generation of Marine officers. Another tap, another photo. Cole in his captain's uniform. He credits Corporal Dalton with saving his life, says she applied a tourniquet to his femoral artery while taking enemy fire, says she refused to leave him even when ordered to seek cover. Wolf turned to Mac. For the first time since Afghanistan, someone was looking at her and seeing who she really was. Not the janitor, not the broken veteran, the warrior. "Corporal," Wolf said, "with your permission." He didn't wait for an answer. He reached down and unbuckled his sidearm. The HK416 rifle slung across his back. Standard seal kit. Worth more than some people's cars. And absolutely never, under any circumstances, handed to someone outside your team. Wolf lifted the rifle, held it horizontally between them, an offering, a gesture of respect so profound that several Marines actually gasped. "A warrior should carry a weapon," Wolf said, "not a mop." Mac's hands shook as she reached out. The weight of the HK416 was familiar and foreign at the same time. 18 months since she'd held a rifle. 18 months since she'd been allowed to be what she was. Her fingers found the magazine release, ejected it, checked the chamber, pulled back the charging handle, inspected the bolt carrier group, every movement precise, automatic, muscle memory from 10,000 hours of training. The Marines watching understood what they were seeing. This wasn't someone who'd been handed a rifle once or twice in basic training. This was a professional. This was someone who knew weapons the way a pianist knows keys. Mac handed the magazine back to Wolf, safed the weapon, slung it across her own back. "Thank you, Master Chief." Wolf nodded once, then turned back to Sutton, who looked like he wanted the floor to open and swallow him whole. "Staff Sergeant," Wolf said, and his voice had gone from respectful to arctic. "You just disrespected a decorated combat veteran. In front of witnesses. That's a court-martial offense. You have 10 seconds to fill the corporal's requisition, apologize, and hope to God she doesn't file a formal complaint." Sutton scrambled, actually scrambled, grabbing bottles of floor polish, disinfectant, paper towels, shoving them into a cardboard box. His hands shook so badly he dropped things twice. Ma'am, Corporal, I didn't know. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Mac picked up the box, looked Sutton directly in the eyes. "You didn't want to know, Staff Sergeant. That's the difference." She turned, walked out of the supply room, still carrying the HK416, still wearing the rifle like it was part of her. Behind her, she heard Wolf's voice one more time. "Someone get Colonel Blackwell on the phone. We need to talk about the culture in this armory." Mac walked through the hallway. Marines stepped aside. Not because she was carrying a rifle, because they'd seen her service record now. Because they knew. The invisible warrior was invisible no more. She made it to the women's bathroom before the tears came, set down the box, unslung the rifle, sat on the cold tile floor with her back against the wall, and cried for the first time in 18 months. But they weren't tears of shame, weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief. Someone had seen her. Someone had recognized her. Someone had given her back the thing she thought she'd lost forever. Her identity, her worth, her warrior's soul. The phone in her pocket buzzed, a text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Corporal Dalton, this is Captain Cole. Master Chief Wolf just sent me a video of what happened at the armory. I'm coming to Fort Bragg. We need to talk about that citation. The Bronze Star was wrong. You deserve better. Much better. Mac stared at the message, read it 3 times, tried to process what better than a Bronze Star could possibly mean. But right now, in this moment, sitting on a bathroom floor with a borrowed rifle and a box of cleaning supplies, she didn't care about medals or citations or official recognition. Someone had seen her. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough. The door to Colonel Patricia Blackwell's office was solid oak, imported, a relic from some forgotten renovation budget that had allowed the base commander to choose her own furniture. Mac had walked past this door 100 times in the last 18 months. Never thought she'd walk through it. Now she stood at attention 3 feet from the colonel's desk, hands behind her back, eyes forward. Master Chief Wolf stood beside her, equally rigid. Between them sat the HK-416 rifle, laid carefully across a cleaning cloth on Blackwell's desk, like evidence at a trial, which Max supposed it was. Colonel Patricia Blackwell was 54 years old and looked like she'd been carved from granite. Gray hair cut military short, eyes the color of gunmetal, a face that had seen too much sun and too much combat to ever look soft. She wore the silver star on her uniform, the Bronze Star with valor, the Purple Heart, 3 deployment patches from the Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan. This was not a woman who tolerated nonsense. Blackwell studied the rifle, studied Mac, studied Wolf. The silence stretched for 30 seconds, 40, a full minute. Mac felt sweat forming at the small of her back despite the air conditioning. Finally, Blackwell spoke. Master Chief, in your professional opinion, was your intervention necessary? Yes, ma'am, Wolf said without hesitation. Staff Sergeant Sutton's behavior constituted sexual harassment and disrespect toward a decorated combat veteran. I felt immediate corrective action was required. By giving her your rifle, by reminding everyone present that Corporal Dalton is a warrior, not a janitor, ma'am. Blackwell's eyes shifted to Mac. Corporal, did you feel threatened by Staff Sergeant Sutton's comments? Mac considered the question, considered lying, considered saying, no, it was fine, she could handle it. That's what she'd been doing for 18 months, handling it, swallowing it, pretending it didn't matter. But the citation was still in her pocket, and Wolf had seen her, really seen her. No more lies. Ma'am, Staff Sergeant Sutton implied I should provide sexual services to boost morale, in front of approximately 20 Marines. Yes, I felt threatened, and humiliated, and tired of being treated like I'm invisible. Blackwell nodded slowly, picked up a folder from her desk, Mac's service record. Every page, every deployment, every award. Helmand Province, August 15th, 2012. You saved 4 Marines while critically wounded. Through and through, gunshot wound to the torso, collapsed lung. You refused evacuation 3 separate times until all casualties were secured. Blackwell looked up. Why didn't you tell anyone here about this? I did tell people, ma'am. It's in my service record, but nobody looked. Nobody looked, Blackwell repeated, or nobody cared to look. Both, ma'am. Blackwell stood, walked to the window, looked out at the training fields where young Marines ran obstacle courses and practiced close-quarters combat. When she spoke again, her voice was different, quieter, more personal. 1991. I was a first lieutenant, 28 years old, Gulf War, Desert Storm. They told me women couldn't handle logistics in a combat zone, said we were too emotional, too weak, too distracted. She turned back to Mac. So I volunteered to run the supply convoy into Kuwait City the day after we liberated it. 30 trucks, 60 Marines, 200 miles through a war zone still smoking from battle. Mac stayed silent, listening. We got ambushed by Iraqi stragglers, Republican Guard troops who didn't get the memo that the war was over. They hit us with RPGs and small arms fire. My driver took a round through the neck, died in my arms while I drove his truck and returned fire with my sidearm. I got the Bronze Star for that. Know what the citation said? for exceptionally meritorious conduct. Not valor, not heroism, meritorious conduct, like I'd done good paperwork. Blackwell walked back to her desk, sat down heavily. 23 years later, I'm a full colonel. I command this base, and I still have to deal with men like Derek Sutton, who think women in uniform are either secretaries or entertainment. So when you ask why I care about this incident, she tapped Mac's service record. Because I remember what it's like to be invisible, and I'm done watching it happen to warriors who've earned better. She picked up her phone, pressed a button. Get me Staff Sergeant Derek Sutton, my office, now. Mac felt her stomach tighten. This was happening, really happening. No more invisibility, no more silence. Blackwell hung up, looked at Wolf. Master Chief, you're dismissed. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Wolf saluted, left. The door closed with a heavy click. Mac was alone with the colonel. Corporal, I'm opening a formal investigation into the culture of harassment in this armory. I'll be interviewing every Marine who witnessed today's incident, and I suspect I'll find this isn't the first time Sutton has behaved this way. Blackwell leaned forward. But I need to know something. Why did you wait 18 months to speak up? Mac swallowed hard. Ma'am, when I came back from Afghanistan, I was broken, physically and mentally. The bullet wound, the shrapnel, the PTSD, they transferred me to non-combat duties, and I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't good enough anymore. Maybe I didn't deserve to be treated like a real Marine because I wasn't one anymore. And now? Now I realize that's exactly what people like Sutton want me to think. That if I stay quiet and invisible, eventually I'll disappear completely. Blackwell nodded. Good, because you're not disappearing, not on my watch. A knock at the door. Sutton entered, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. He saw Mac, saw the rifle on the desk, understood immediately that his career was about to end. Staff Sergeant Sutton, Blackwell said, her voice cold enough to freeze nitrogen. You're suspended from duty pending a court-martial investigation. You will surrender your credentials and be escorted to your barracks, where you will remain until further notice. Do you understand? Ma'am, I can explain. I don't want your explanations. I want you out of my armory. Dismissed. Sutton left without another word. His footsteps echoed down the hallway like a condemned man walking to the gallows. Blackwell turned back to Mac. You're being reassigned, effective immediately. No more janitorial duty. I'm putting you in the training command. Combat medicine instruction for new recruits. Mac felt her heart skip. Ma'am, I don't know if I'm ready. I didn't ask if you were ready. I'm telling you what you're going to do. These recruits need to learn from someone who's actually been there. Someone who's saved lives under fire. Someone who knows what it means to be a Marine. Blackwell stood, extended her hand. Welcome back to the fight, Corporal. Mac shook her hand, felt something unlock in her chest. Something that had been frozen for 18 months. Purpose. That night, Mac sat on her barracks bed and stared at her phone. 3 missed calls from a Tennessee number. Her grandfather, Bull Dalton. She'd been avoiding his calls for weeks, couldn't face him, couldn't explain why she'd let herself become invisible. Now she had no choice. She called back. He answered on the first ring. Mac, that you, girl? His voice was gravel and honey. 73 years old, but still strong, still clear. Still the voice that had told her bedtime stories about Kuwait and told her she could be anything she wanted if she was willing to bleed for it. Hey, Gramps. Don't you hey, Gramps me. You haven't called in 6 weeks. I was about to drive up there myself. Mac felt tears threatening, pushed them back. I've been busy. Busy pushing mops, I know. Your mother told me. Of course she had. Mac's mother had never understood why her daughter wanted to be a Marine. Never understood why anyone would volunteer to get shot at for a living. Gramps, I messed up. I let them put me in a job I hate, and I just disappeared. Silence on the other end. Then Bull's voice, quieter now. You remember what I told you about Kafji? You've told me 100 stories about Kafji. The important one, the one about quitting. Mac closed her eyes. She remembered. Battle of Kafji, January 91. Iraqi Republican Guard pushed across the border into Saudi Arabia. Everyone thought they'd roll right through us. But we held. Me and my platoon held that city for 36 hours against armor and artillery. Mac had heard this story since she was 6 years old, but she let him tell it again, because she needed to hear it. Second day, we were down to 18 rounds per rifle. Water was gone, food was gone, radio was sketchy. My lieutenant got hit by shrapnel, went down hard, and I'm standing there, 19 years old, thinking, I can't do this. I can't lead these men. I'm not good enough. Bull paused. Mac heard him take a sip of something, probably bourbon. He always had bourbon when he told war stories. But then I looked at my Marines, looked at their faces, and I realized something. They didn't care if I was good enough. They needed me to be good enough. So I was. Carried that lieutenant 400 meters under fire. Got him to an aid station. Saved his life. Got a Bronze Star. I know, Gramps, you showed me the medal. The medal doesn't matter. What matters is this. When they try to make you quit, you don't. When they try to make you small, you get bigger. When they try to make you invisible, you burn so bright they can't look away. His voice hardened. You're Bull Dalton's granddaughter. You don't get to disappear. You understand me? Mac felt something break inside her. The dam she'd been holding for 18 months. The tears came fast and hard. I got shot, Gramps. Got shot saving people, and they transferred me to janitorial duty like I'm broken. Like I'm not a Marine anymore. Are you broken? I don't know. Then let me tell you, you're not broken. You're wounded. There's a difference. Broken things don't work anymore. Wounded things heal and come back stronger. You hearing me? Yes. Say it. I'm not broken. Louder. I'm not broken. Damn right you're not. Now you go back there tomorrow and you show them who Mackenzie Dalton really is. You show them the woman who saved 4 Marines under fire. You show them the warrior. Mac wiped her eyes. Colonel Blackwell already did that. She's reassigning me. Training command. Combat medicine instruction. Bull laughed. A deep, booming sound that Mac hadn't heard in too long. Well, hell, looks like someone up there has sense. You're going to be amazing at that, girl. Those recruits are lucky to have you. Gramps, what if I mess up? What if I can't do it? Then you'll mess up, and you'll learn, and you'll get better. That's what warriors do. We don't start perfect. We earn perfect through blood and sweat and getting knocked down and getting back up. You've already proven you can do that. Everything else is just details. They talked for another hour, about nothing, about everything. Bull told her about the new truck he'd bought, about the garden he was planting, about the physical therapy he was doing for his hip. Normal things, human things. The things warriors talked about when they weren't at war. When Mac finally hung up, it was past midnight, but she felt lighter, clearer. The fog that had surrounded her for 18 months was lifting. She opened her footlocker, pulled out the locked box, opened it. The Bronze Star gleamed in the dim light, the purple heart beside it. She'd earned these in blood, in pain, in courage that most people would never understand. Tomorrow, she would wear them. 5 days later, Max stood in front of her first training class. 30 recruits, fresh out of boot camp, 18 years old, most of them, scared and cocky in equal measure. The dangerous combination of youth and ignorance. She wore her dress uniform, every ribbon in place, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Combat Action Ribbon, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, Good Conduct Medal. The decorations told a story, the story of who she was. The recruits stared. A few whispered. At ease, Max said. Her voice carried across the classroom with authority she'd almost forgotten she had. I'm Corporal Dalton. For the next 8 weeks, I'm going to teach you how to keep your fellow Marines alive in combat. How many of you think you already know combat medicine? Half the hands went up. Max smiled. She'd expected this. Good. Everyone who raised their hand, stand up. 15 recruits stood. Now drop and give me 20, because the first lesson of combat medicine is this. You don't know anything. Not yet. And arrogance gets people killed. The recruits dropped, started doing push-ups. Mac walked between them as they counted. Combat medicine isn't about memorizing procedures. It's about making life or death decisions in seconds while someone is shooting at you. It's about controlling bleeding when your hands are shaking. It's about staying calm when everything around you is on fire. She stopped in front of a kid who was struggling on his 15th push-up. Young, baby-faced, reminded her of Griffin Cole. "What's your name, recruit?" "Private Jensen, ma'am." "You scared, Jensen?" "No, ma'am." You should be. Fear keeps you alert. Arrogance gets you killed. Remember that. She let them finish their push-ups. Watched them struggle back to their feet, breathing hard. Helmand Province, August 20th, 12. My convoy hit an IED. 4 casualties, all critical. I was the only combat medic. I had to decide who to treat first, who could wait, who might die if I made the wrong choice. The room was silent now, everyone listening. I chose the Marine with arterial bleeding, applied a tourniquet under fire, moved to the next casualty, abdominal wounds, had to keep his intestines from spilling out while bullets snapped overhead. Third casualty had a possible spinal injury, had to immobilize him perfectly or risk paralysis. Fourth casualty was going into shock, needed plasma, needed it fast. Mac walked to the front of the classroom, turned to face them. I saved all 4, got them on the medevac, but while I was doing that, I took a round through my torso, right here. She pointed to her right side. Through and through, collapsed lung. And I didn't stop working until every single Marine was evacuated. She pulled out her Bronze Star citation, held it up. This says I demonstrated exceptional valor under fire. Know what it doesn't say? It doesn't say I was special. It doesn't say I was superhuman. It says I did my job. That's what I'm going to teach you. How to do your job when everything is going wrong and people are dying and you're scared out of your mind. A hand went up. A female recruit, small, couldn't be more than 5'2". Yes? Corporal, how did you stay calm when you were wounded? Mac considered the question. Nobody had ever asked her that before. I didn't stay calm, Private. I was terrified. My hands were shaking. I could taste blood in my mouth. But I focused on one thing at a time. One tourniquet, one bandage, one Marine. I didn't think about the big picture. I just did the next right thing, and then the next, and then the next. That's the secret. There is no secret. You just keep moving forward. The class continued for 3 hours. Mac demonstrated every technique, every procedure, let the recruits practice on training dummies, corrected their mistakes, pushed them harder than they'd ever been pushed. At the end, the small female recruit approached. Corporal Dalton, I'm Private Emma Caldwell. What can I do for you, Caldwell? The guys in my unit keep saying I'm too small to be a real Marine, that I'll wash out, that I don't belong here. Max studied her, saw herself at 18, determined, scared, ready to prove the world wrong. You know what I tell people who say women don't belong in combat, Private? What, ma'am? I don't tell them anything. I show them. Actions speak louder than words. You want to shut them up? Be the best in your unit. Outwork them. Outlast them. Make them realize that size doesn't matter. Skill does. Caldwell nodded. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. She left. Mac watched her go, saw the determination in her stride. That one was going to make it. 6 weeks into her new assignment, Mac received a phone call that changed everything. Corporal Dalton, this is Captain Griffin Cole. I don't know if you remember me. I remember you, sir. Helmand Province. Arterial bleed. You nearly died. I nearly died because you saved my life. Cole's voice was thick with emotion. Ma'am, I've been working on something for the past year. Master Chief Wolf sent me a video of what happened at the armory, and I realized I needed to move faster. Sir, I don't understand. Your Bronze Star citation was wrong. The initial report undersold what you did. I've been gathering testimony from the other 3 Marines you saved, from the medevac crew, from everyone who was there that day, and I've submitted a formal request to upgrade your award. Mac felt her heart stop. Upgrade to what, sir? The Medal of Honor. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. The Medal of Honor was for heroes, for legends, for people who did impossible things, not for someone who'd just done her job. Sir, I don't deserve that. You refused evacuation 3 times while critically wounded. You saved 4 Marines under sustained enemy fire. Ma'am, the citation says you told the medevac pilot, take them first. I can wait. You had a collapsed lung. You were bleeding internally, and you told them to leave you behind. Mac remembered that moment, remembered the pain, the fear, the absolute certainty that those 4 Marines were going home, no matter what it cost her. I couldn't leave them, sir. I know. That's why you deserve the Medal of Honor. That's why I'm coming to Fort Bragg next week. We need to go through your testimony. Build the strongest case possible. This is happening, Corporal. You're getting the recognition you earned. After the call ended, Max sat in stunned silence. The Medal of Honor. The highest military decoration. The one that meant you'd gone above and beyond, not just bravery, but selflessness. She thought about her grandfather, Bull Dalton, Bronze Star for Valor. He'd be so proud. She thought about Derek Sutton, the man who tried to make her invisible, who treated her like garbage. She wondered if he knew. Wondered if he'd heard that the janitor he'd humiliated was about to receive the nation's highest honor. She hoped he had. She hoped he was choking on it. But more than that, she thought about the recruits. The 30 young Marines she was training. The ones who looked at her now with respect, with admiration, with the understanding that she wasn't just their instructor. She was proof that you could be broken and come back stronger. She pulled out her phone, called Bull. Gramps, you sitting down? I'm 73 years old. I'm always sitting down. What's going on? Captain Cole called, the Marine I saved in Afghanistan. He's nominating me for the Medal of Honor. Silence. Then a sound Mac had never heard before. Her grandfather crying. Gramps? I'm here, girl. I'm here, just give me a second. She waited, heard him blow his nose, clear his throat. Medal of Honor. My granddaughter. Medal of Honor. He laughed through the tears. Your grandmother would be so proud. God, I wish she was here to see this. She sees it, Gramps. I know she does. You're damn right she does. And she's up there right now telling everyone, that's my girl. That's my Mackenzie. They talked until Mac's phone battery died. About the ceremony, about Washington, D.C., about what it meant, about legacy and honor and the weight of wearing a medal that only 3,000 people in American history had ever received. When Mac finally fell asleep that night, she dreamed of Helmand Province. But for the first time in 18 months, it wasn't a nightmare. It was a memory. 4 Marines alive because of her. 4 families whole because she'd refused to quit. She woke up at 0500, got dressed, put on her uniform with every ribbon in place, walked to the training facility with her head high. The invisible warrior wasn't invisible anymore, and she was never going to be invisible again. 8 months passed like water through fingers. October 2014 became March 2015. The leaves changed. The weather turned cold, and Corporal Mackenzie Dalton transformed from a woman pushing a mop to one of the most respected combat medicine instructors at Fort Bragg. She trained 216 recruits. Every single one of them knew her story. Every single one of them understood that the woman teaching them how to save lives had done exactly that under conditions most of them couldn't imagine. Private Emma Caldwell had become her unofficial protege, the small recruit who'd been told she was too weak, too small, too female to be a real Marine. Max saw herself in Caldwell, saw the same determination, the same refusal to accept other people's limitations. On a cold Tuesday morning in March, Mac put Caldwell and her unit through an endurance test. Full combat gear, 40-pound pack, 5-mile run, standard qualification exercise. The male recruits started strong, cocky, making jokes about how Caldwell would wash out before the 3rd mile. Mac followed in a Humvee, watching, saying nothing. By mile 3, half the men were struggling. By mile 4, Caldwell had passed 2/3 of them. And when they crossed the finish line, Private Emma Caldwell came in 4th out of 32 recruits. The top 3 were men who outweighed her by 80 pounds. She collapsed at the finish line, gasping, soaked with sweat. Mac walked over, extended her hand, pulled her to her feet. "How do you feel, Private?" "Like I'm going to die, ma'am." "But you didn't quit." "No, ma'am. Neither did I. In Afghanistan. When I was shot, when I was bleeding, when every cell in my body was screaming at me to stop. I didn't quit. Know why?" Caldwell shook her head, still trying to catch her breath. "Because quitting meant those 4 Marines died. And I wasn't going to let that happen. You just proved the same thing. Size doesn't matter. Heart matters. Remember that." Caldwell nodded, stood straighter despite the exhaustion. Mac turned to address the entire unit. The men who'd been making jokes were now silent, ashamed. "Anyone here still think Private Caldwell doesn't belong in this unit?" No one spoke. "Good, because the Marine next to you isn't defined by their body. They're defined by their will, by their courage, by their refusal to quit when things get hard. Caldwell just demonstrated more warrior spirit than some of you will show in your entire careers. Learn from her." She dismissed the unit. Watched them limp away, muscles screaming, egos bruised. It was a good lesson, the kind that stuck. Her phone rang. Captain Cole. "Ma'am, it's official. The Medal of Honor has been approved. Ceremony is scheduled for March 20th at the White House. East Room, 1400 hours. Your family's been notified." Mac's legs went weak. She sat down hard on the nearest bench. 8 months of waiting. 8 months of testimony and paperwork and investigations. 8 months of wondering if this was real. Now it was real. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, just be there. And ma'am, all 4 of us are coming. Me, Cross, Rivers, Bennett, the men whose lives you saved. We wouldn't miss this for anything." After the call ended, Max sat in silence. The Medal of Honor. In 10 days, she would stand in the White House and receive the highest military decoration from the President of the United States. Her phone rang again. Bull Dalton. "Did Cole call you?" "He did, Gramps. I'm flying up there tomorrow, staying until the ceremony. No arguments. I'm not missing my granddaughter receiving the Medal of Honor." "I wouldn't let you miss it." "Damn right you wouldn't. Mac, I need you to understand something. This medal isn't just about what you did in Afghanistan. It's about every person who said women don't belong in combat. Every person who said you were too weak, too emotional, too broken. You're proving them all wrong. And I get to watch." Mac felt tears threatening. Again. She'd cried more in the last 8 months than she had in the previous 10 years combined. "Gramps, what if I mess up the ceremony? What if I say something stupid?" Bull laughed. "Then you'll say something stupid, and it'll be fine, because you're not there to give a speech. You're there to receive the recognition you earned in blood. Everything else is just theater." He was right. He was always right. "I love you, Gramps." "I love you too, girl. Now go tell your recruits. They deserve to know their instructor is about to make history." The next morning, Max stood in front of her training class. Same 30 recruits, same classroom. But everything felt different now. At ease, I have an announcement. On March 20th, I'll be traveling to Washington, D.C. Your training will be handled by Gunnery Sergeant Morrison while I'm gone. Any questions? Caldwell raised her hand. Ma'am, why are you going to D.C.? Mac paused. She could deflect, could say it was personal business, could maintain the professional distance between instructor and recruit, but these Marines deserve the truth. I'm receiving the Medal of Honor from the President. The room exploded. Recruits jumped to their feet. Applause, cheers, the kind of genuine, unrestrained celebration that military discipline usually suppressed. Mac let it continue for 30 seconds, then raised her hand. Silence fell immediately. The Medal of Honor isn't about me. It's about the 4 Marines I saved. It's about the mission. It's about the Corps. I didn't do anything special. I did my job. And if any of you ever find yourselves in a similar situation, you'll do the same. Because that's what Marines do. We take care of our own, no matter the cost. After class, the recruits lined up to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her they were honored to learn from her. Caldwell was last in line. She stood at attention, eyes forward. Ma'am, permission to speak freely? Granted. When I first got here, the guys in my unit said I'd never make it, said women don't belong in combat, that we're too weak. But then I met you, and I realized they were wrong. Not because you're strong, because you refused to quit. You taught me that, and I'll never forget it. Mac looked at this 19-year-old kid who reminded her so much of herself, who had the same fire, the same determination, the same refusal to accept other people's limitations. Private Caldwell, 10 years from now, you're going to be standing where I am, teaching the next generation, proving that courage has nothing to do with gender and everything to do with heart. I believe that. Don't let anyone tell you different. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Caldwell left. Mac watched her go, saw the future of the Marine Corps walking away. Young, female, unstoppable. It was a good feeling. Bull Dalton arrived the next day, 73 years old, still standing straight, still moving with the careful precision of a man who'd spent 40 years in uniform. He wore a jacket with his Gulf War patches sewn on the sleeves, his bronze star pinned to his chest. Mac picked him up at the airport. They didn't speak for the first 10 minutes of the drive, just sat together. Grandfather and granddaughter, 2 warriors from 2 different wars. Finally, Bull broke the silence. Your grandmother would be so proud of you. Mac kept her eyes on the road. I wish she was here. She is here, in you. Every time you refuse to quit, every time you stand up when the world tries to push you down. That's her. That's her fire in your soul. They spent the week together. Bull attended one of Mac's training sessions, watched her teach combat medicine to recruits who hung on her every word, watched her demonstrate techniques with the confidence of someone who'd done them under fire. After class, several recruits approached Bull, asked about his service, about Gulf War, about what it was like to fight in Desert Storm. Bull told them the truth. The heat, the fear, the confusion, the moments of absolute terror mixed with hours of crushing boredom. War as it really was. Not the Hollywood version. But the one thing I knew, Bull said, was that the Marines next to me would die before they let me down. And I'd die before I let them down. That's the brotherhood. That's what makes us different from everyone else. We don't fight for politicians or policies. We fight for each other. The recruits listened, absorbed, understood. That night, Mac and Bull sat in her small barracks room. She'd made space for him, given him her bed. She'd sleep on the floor. He'd argued. She'd refused to budge. Gramps, tell me about Kafji, the real story, not the one you tell at barbecues. Bull was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands, hands that had held rifles and pulled wounded men to safety and signed discharge papers when his body finally gave out. Battle of Kafji, January 29th through 31st, 1991. Iraqi Republican Guard pushed across the border. First ground combat of the war. Everyone thought we'd get overrun. They had tanks, artillery, air support from helicopters we couldn't track. He paused, took a sip of bourbon from the flask he always carried. My platoon held a municipal building in the center of town. 32 Marines against an armored battalion. We held for 36 hours. Lost 3 men. Wounded 11. I carried my lieutenant 400 meters under artillery fire. Got him to an aid station. Saved his life. Got a Bronze Star. You never told me you lost 3 men. Because I didn't want you to think war was romantic. It's not. It's ugly. It's watching your friends die and knowing you can't save everyone. But you save who you can, and you live with the rest. Mac understood. She'd lived with her own ghost for 3 years now. The Marines she'd saved haunted her less than the ones she'd never had a chance to save. The casualties from other convoys, other firefights, other desperate moments where she wasn't there. Gramps, what if I don't deserve the Medal of Honor? What if I just got lucky? Bull looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death. Luck is when a bullet misses. Courage is when you keep moving forward even when it doesn't. You didn't get lucky, Mac. You got shot, and you kept working. That's not luck. That's valor. March 20th arrived with cold rain and gray skies. Mac wore her dress blues, every ribbon in perfect alignment, her hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Bull wore his own dress blues, 40 years old, pressed carefully, the uniform he'd been married in, buried his wife in, would eventually be buried in himself. They flew to Washington, D.C. on a military transport. Mac, Bull, and Captain Griffin Cole, the young officer who'd nearly died in the Afghan sand, who dedicated the last year to making sure Mac got the recognition she deserved. The White House was exactly as imposing as Mac had imagined. White columns, manicured lawns, history in every brick. They were escorted through security, through hallways lined with portraits of presidents and first ladies and moments that defined American history. The East Room was enormous, high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, rows of chairs filled with dignitaries, military brass, members of Congress, and Mac's fellow Marines. All 4 men she'd saved were there. Captain Cole, Sergeant Dylan Cross, PFC Ethan Rivers, Corporal Travis Bennett. They wore their dress blues, stood when she entered, saluted. Mac saluted back, felt her throat tighten. Bennett had brought his son, a 9-year-old boy who looked at Mac like she was a superhero. Because to him, she was. She was the reason his father had come home from war, the reason he still had a dad to throw a baseball with. The president entered. Everyone stood. The ceremony began. A Marine colonel read the citation. Every word, every detail of that day in Helmand Province. The IED, the casualties, the 3 separate trips into the kill zone, the gunshot wound, the refusal to evacuate. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty, Corporal Mackenzie Dalton distinguished herself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving as a combat medic with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Mac stood at attention, eyes forward, breathing steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. On August 15, 2012, Corporal Dalton's convoy was attacked by a vehicle-borne, improvised explosive device, followed by sustained enemy small arms fire. Without regard for her own safety, Corporal Dalton immediately proceeded to the burning lead vehicle to provide medical aid to 4 critically wounded Marines. The citation continued. Every detail, every moment. Mac remembered all of it, could still smell the smoke, still feel the heat, still hear Griffin Cole screaming as she applied the tourniquet. Despite suffering a through-and-through gunshot wound to her torso, resulting in a collapsed lung and severe internal bleeding, Corporal Dalton refused medical evacuation. insisting that all wounded Marines be evacuated first. Her extraordinary heroism and selflessness in the face of almost certain death reflect great credit upon herself and were in keeping with the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. The President stepped forward, held the Medal of Honor, the light blue ribbon, the gold star, the weight of 3,000 heroes who'd worn it before. He placed it around Mac's neck, shook her hand, looked her in the eyes. "Thank you for your service, Corporal. You're an American hero." Mac saluted. The President returned it. And then the room erupted in applause that lasted 3 full minutes. Bull Dalton stood in the front row, tears streaming down his face, saluting his granddaughter, the warrior he'd helped raise, the woman who'd proven that courage had no gender, no size limit, no restrictions except the limits we placed on ourselves. After the ceremony, Mac stood with the 4 Marines she'd saved. They formed a circle, brothers and sister in arms, bound by blood and fire and the knowledge that they'd faced death together and survived. Cole spoke first. "Ma'am, I have a daughter now, 2 years old. She's alive because you saved me, because you refused to quit. I'm going to tell her about you, about the woman who taught me what real courage looks like." Cross nodded. "My wife always asked me what happened over there. I never told her. Couldn't find the words, but now I can show her this. Show her the woman who pulled me out of that burning vehicle. Show her what a hero looks like." Rivers was in a wheelchair. The spinal injury had left him paralyzed from the waist down, but his eyes were clear. His voice was strong. "Ma'am, I'm never going to walk again, but I'm alive. I got married last year. I'm starting college next fall. I have a future because you gave it to me. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve what you did." Bennett's 9-year-old son stepped forward, looked up at Mac with wide eyes. "Miss Dalton? My dad says you're the bravest person he ever met." Mac knelt down, looked the kid in the eyes, saw her legacy standing there, the next generation, the future she'd fought to protect. "Your dad's the brave one. He went to war. He fought for his country. He came home to you. That takes more courage than anything I did." The boy thought about this, then nodded seriously. "Can I shake your hand?" "You can do better than that." Mac stood, saluted him. The boy's eyes went wide. He tried to return the salute, got it mostly right. His father helped him adjust his hand position. It was perfect. 1 year later, March 2016, Captain Mackenzie Dalton stood in front of her new command. She'd been promoted, given her own training unit, 60 recruits, all learning combat medicine from the woman who'd proven it could save lives under the worst possible conditions. Private Emma Caldwell was now Lance Corporal Emma Caldwell, top of her class, recommended for Scout sniper training, the first female Marine from Fort Bragg to receive that recommendation. Mac had started a program, called it the Invisible Warriors Initiative, a support system for combat veterans who'd been reassigned to non-combat roles, who felt forgotten, invisible, broken. The program paired them with recruits, let them share their stories, let them teach, let them remember that their service mattered, that their sacrifices weren't forgotten, that a warrior's worth wasn't measured by their current assignment, but by the battles they'd already won. Derek Sutton had been court-martialed, dishonorably discharged. His military career ended the same day Mac's true career began. Mac had testified at his hearing, had looked him in the eyes and told the truth about what he'd done, what he'd said, how he'd treated her. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only relief that he couldn't hurt anyone else. Master Chief Brennan Wolfe had attended Mac's promotion ceremony, had presented her with captain's bars, had returned the HK-416 rifle he'd given her that day in the armory. "This belongs to you now, Captain. You've earned it." Mac had accepted the rifle, had it mounted on the wall of her office, a reminder of the day she stopped being invisible, the day someone saw her for who she really was. On a cold March morning, Mac stood on the training field and watched her recruits run an obstacle course. Watch them struggle, fall, get back up, push harder, refuse to quit. She thought about Afghanistan, about the 4 Marines she'd saved, about the bullet that should have killed her but didn't, about the 18 months she'd spent invisible, about the day Master Chief Wolf had given her back her identity. She thought about Bull Dalton, her grandfather, her hero, who'd passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 months ago. 75 years old, surrounded by family. His last words had been about Mac, about how proud he was, about how she'd become everything he'd hoped she would be. She'd buried him in his dress blues, with his Bronze Star, with full military honors, 3-volley salute, taps played by a lone bugler. The American flag folded and presented to her as next of kin. She kept that flag in her office, next to the Medal of Honor, next to the photograph of her and Bull at the White House ceremony. Reminders of where she'd come from, who she'd been, who she'd become. Lance Corporal Emma Caldwell jogged up, breathing hard from the obstacle course but standing straight. "Ma'am, permission to speak?" "Granted. I got my orders, Scout Sniper School, Quantico. I ship out next month." Max smiled. "Outstanding. You've earned it." "Ma'am, I wouldn't be here without you, without everything you taught me. I just wanted you to know that." Mac looked at this young Marine, saw herself 5 years ago, determined, fierce, ready to prove the world wrong. "Caldwell, you're going to do great things. You're going to face people who say you don't belong, who say women can't be snipers, can't handle the pressure, can't compete with men." What should I tell them? Nothing. Show them. Actions speak louder than words. Be so good they can't ignore you. Be so skilled they can't dismiss you. Be the warrior I know you are. Caldwell saluted. "Yes, ma'am. I won't let you down. You could never let me down. Now get back to training. Those obstacles won't run themselves." Caldwell jogged away. Mac watched her go, watched the future of the Marine Corps disappear into the morning mist. Young, strong, unstoppable. She pulled out her phone, looked at the last text message Bull had sent her before he died. "You're not invisible anymore. You're a beacon. Light the way for others." Mac put the phone away, turned back to the training field. Her recruits were finishing the obstacle course, some succeeding, some failing, all learning, all growing, all becoming the warriors America needed them to be. And she was there to guide them, to teach them, to show them that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being terrified and moving forward anyway. She thought about the title people had started using, the Invisible Warrior, the woman who'd been overlooked, dismissed, forgotten, until the day she proved she was anything but invisible. She'd spent 18 months pushing a mop, 18 months believing she was broken, 18 months letting other people define who she was. Never again. Captain Mackenzie Dalton stood on the training field and watched the sun rise over Fort Bragg. Watched the morning light paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Watched another day begin, another opportunity to train warriors, to save lives, to make a difference. She touched the Medal of Honor hanging around her neck, felt its weight, its significance, the 3,000 heroes who'd worn it before, the sacrifice it represented, the courage it honored. But more than that, she felt the weight of responsibility to Bull, to Cole and Cross and Rivers and Bennett, to Caldwell and every recruit she trained, to every invisible warrior who'd been told they didn't matter. She would light the way. She would be the beacon. She would prove that a warrior's worth wasn't measured by their gender or their current assignment or their visible wounds. It was measured by their refusal to quit, their commitment to their brothers and sisters in arms, their willingness to sacrifice everything for something greater than themselves. The invisible warrior was invisible no more, and she would make damn sure no one ever forgot it.